Team foul number 4.
Foul, and to me, that just, I mean, Chelsea Gray with counter moves and just going through the body, creating, gets Chelsea Gray, watch here at the end, gets around the forearm, which is where I believe.
New footage has emerged surrounding a play involving Caitlin Clark, and what this footage reveals demands immediate, serious, and honest examination from everyone who has been following this situation. Because what appeared on the surface to be one thing, what the broadcast camera angle presented to millions of viewers in real time, was not the complete picture of what actually occurred on that basketball court. And the complete picture, now visible through footage captured from a different angle by what appears to be a courtside reporter or someone positioned close to the action, changes the conversation in a fundamental and deep was the interpretation available from the camera angle the network provided. Viewers saw her on the floor and assumed the connection was between her emotional reaction to the officiating call and her physical position on the ground. That interpretation was incomplete. The footage that has now surfaced from a different angle reveals that Chelsea Gray made direct physical contact with Caitlin Clark's midsection during this play. Not an incidental brush, not a minor collision that occurs naturally in the physical contest of professional basketball, a deliberate and forceful movement that planted Gray's head. A separate player, a separate documented moment of physical contact directed at Caitlin Clark that went unrecognized by the broader public because the broadcast camera angle did not capture the full picture of what occurred. There are people who, when Clark was on the ground following this play, suggested she was flopping, that she was exaggerating the impact of the contact for strategic purposes, that she was performing rather than genuinely responding to physical force. This footage answers that suggestion definitively. Caitlin Clark was not flopping. She was hit in the toughness, and she tried to play through it. That detail matters enormously, because a player who is manufacturing a reaction for strategic purposes does not attempt to immediately stand up and continue competing. A player who has genuinely an advocacy dressed up as sports analysis. This is the straightforward observation that footage from a different camera angle shows physical contact occurring that was not visible from the broadcast camera, that the player on the receiving end of that contact was put on the floor by it, and that the institutional apparatus responsible for monitoring and penalizing exactly this kind of conduct was present, reviewed the situation, and produced an outcome that this new footage calls into serious question. The fans, the congressional representatives who have already sent formal letters demanding accountability, and the broader public watching this situation deserve to know what the officials saw, what their review process determined, and what standard was being applied when they made their decision. Because here is the broader institutional reality that this specific incident connects to in ways that cannot be ignored. Caitlin Clark has now been the documented recipient of significant physical contact in multiple consecutive games involving the same opposing franchise, and in at least one additional game involving a different opponent. The Alyssa Thomas throat incident generalized as insufficient. Lexi Hall was elbowed in the face in a subsequent Indiana-Phoenix matchup. And now footage has emerged showing Chelsea Gray making direct contact with Clark's midsection in a way that put her on the floor during the Las Vegas game. Each of these incidents, examined individually, carries its own set of circumstances and its own appropriate level of scrutiny. But examined together across multiple games, involving multiple players and multiple opposing franchises, they form a pattern that the WNBA's institutional leadership cannot responsibly characterize as isolated coincidence or the expected physical byproduct of competitive basketball. This is a player safety issue, stated plainly, directly, and without the diplomatic hedging that has allowed this conversation to be managed rather than resolved. Caitlin Clark is being subjected to repeated physical contact in professional basketball games, some of which has resulted in injury requiring her to miss multiple consecutive games. and the institutional apparatus responsible for preventing, reviewing, and penalizing such contact has not responded with the consistency and the proportionate seriousness that the documented pattern demands. The congressional representatives who sent that letter to Commissioner Kathy Engelbert were not acting on speculation or partisan motivation. They were responding to documented, publicly visible incidents captured on broadcast cameras and reviewed by league officials whose responses generated widespread concern about the adequacy of the league's player protection standards. This new footage, showing contact to Clark's midsection that was not visible from the broadcast angle, but is now clearly visible from courtside footage, adds additional documented evidence to the pattern those congressional representatives were already formally addressing. Engelbert's office has not responded publicly to this new footage. The league has not issued a statement clarifying what the officiating review during that play determined or what standard was applied in evaluating the contact. The post-game press conferences that followed the Las Vegas game were described as notably brief, which is itself worth acknowledging as a questions being asked. Brief press conferences do not resolve the questions this footage raises. Transparent, specific, and direct institutional communication is what resolves those questions. And that communication has not been provided. Let us also address the question of what this footage means for the people who have been arguing in various media spaces and comment sections that the concerns being raised about Clark's physical safety in this league are exaggerated, manufactured, or motivated by something other than genuine concern for documented incidents. This footage is the answer to that argument. This is not a media creation. This is not fan sensitivity. It is the documentation of something that already occurred. The flopping accusation that was circulating following this play is now definitively answered by this footage. Clark was not flopping. She was hit in the midsection. The physical reaction she displayed was the expected and honest response to that specific kind of impact. Her subsequent attempt to stand up and continue was not theater. It was athletic determination colliding with the physical reality of having the air knocked from her body. That deserves to be stated clearly because the flopping accusation was itself a form of institutional minimization. It redirected the conversation from the conduct of the player who made contact to the response of the player who received it. That is a specific and familiar rhetorical pattern that this league's media ecosystem has applied repeatedly to situations involving Clark throughout this season. It shifts responsibility from the actor to the recipient and frames the documented physical impact as a performance rather than a genuine consequence. This footage ends that particular argument for the most important player does not continue producing consequences that damage both the player and the league's credibility simultaneously. The footage is there. It is visible. It is not ambiguous. And it demands a response that matches the seriousness of what it shows. The institution needs to provide that response immediately, and with the transparency that this moment, this player, and this fan base have earned through everything they have endured watching this situation unfold across an entire season.